Okay, so as we talked about in class, our sizes are broken down into different size grades. So sizes 4, 6, and 8 have, and to, between 8 and 10, have a difference between them of 1 inch. So they would have all the same grouping of sizes, and that would fall in this category here along our side seam. So for 1 inch graded items, we need to move this side point out by 1/4 of an inch, which is 1/4 of the entire circumference that we need to increase by, which is 1 inch. For sizes 10 to 12, 12 to 14, 14 to 16, the difference between the total circumference is 1.5 inches, which if you divide that by 4 becomes 3/8 of an inch. So those four sizes have to be increased by a different value than our first set of sizes. It's by a little bit more. So the difference between those sizes, you can see visually, is a little bit larger. Our largest size here, the difference between 16 to 18, is actually a 2-inch total circumference, and divided by 4 is 1/2 an inch. So the difference between these two lines at the side seam is 1/2 an inch. We can accomplish this really nicely in the CLO grading scheme by using this offset function. So if we look at that and pull that menu down, we can see we now have some open boxes that we can fill in. Now, I can see here that the grading wants me to move my points for all sizes in the X direction by 1/8 of an inch. And so in the X axis, I can select all and fill this in with 0.125. Oops, got my wrong points selected. I'm going to go to this one here. There we are. And I'm going to do 0.125. Okay. Now I'm looking at this and I see that something's wrong. My red point is lower than my pink point, and that's telling me that I've got the sign wrong. So instead of having the option to do a right arrow key versus left arrow key, I need to be aware and cognizant of the sign of my direction. So positive X versus negative X. And so this case, I'm going to switch this now to negative 0.125, and that will get my orientation correct. So I want my pink point to be lower than my red point because it's a bigger size. Okay, so that's that. If we go back to our different size grades, I'm now going to put that 1/4 inch there into my 4 to 6, 0.25. I'm going to do it for my 6 to 8 size range, 0.25. And again, an idiosyncrasy of the grading is that it disappears, that first point. So I'm going to do it again. And it'll maintain after that. The size difference between an 8 to 10 is again 0.25. The size difference between 10 to 12, we can delete this value here, is 0.375, which is, 375, which is equivalent to 3/8 of an inch. And same thing here, 0.375. And finally, 14 to 16 is again 0.375. And finally, our last size has to be this 2-inch grade. So the value we input into the offset is 0.5. So this is literally the distance and offset from each of our sizes from one to the next. And I can see automatically that the grading looks really good. My red line, which is my smallest size, is inside my base size because it's smaller. And my pink line is my largest size. It is on the furthest point. And I also see that there's a variable amount of offset between my sizes. And if I scroll in really tight, they actually give me what those offsets are so I can double check and make sure it looks good. So fantastic. Let's do that same exact value up here on our waistline, but if we look, our waistline hasn't changed. It is not being affected by the 1/8 inch in the X direction, so we're simply going to add our offset values like we did here. And we could copy and paste it, but I'm finding it difficult for this particular curved area, so we'll just do it by hand as a bit of practice. So again, begin we don't need to put anything in our X-axis. Let's begin by doing our 0.25. Again, 0.25, it's going to delete my first one. I can go back and do that again, 0.25, and then continue on, 0.25. We switch from 10 to 12 to the 1.5 inch grade. So that would be 0.375. Didn't hold, 0.375, okay. And then we'll go to the next one, 0.375. 14 to 16 is also 0.375. And then finally for our size 16 to 18, the difference or the offset is 0.5. Okay, and that looks fantastic. Now, because there is another option for grading, and that is to copy and paste. And so it doesn't work really nicely when you are copy and pasting because of this curved area. But if I copy and paste this point, I'm going to click on my base point, the black one. I'm going to click on it and right click. It's going to say copy. And I'm going to scroll down here and apply that to my hem because the grade rules are the same. So I'm going to click on my baseline. I'm going to highlight it, right click to pull up my menu, and I'm going to mirror paste the Y. Not the X and Y because I've already changed my X, but just the Y. So I see that it's done something silly here because it's overridden what I already put in there. So if that's the case, I can go back over here. I'm still highlighted, and I can put negative 0.25 in here to remedy that situation. Or I can go back and use the arrow key as I did before. So a couple ways to do the same thing. So this has created a very nice grade. If you click anywhere else away from this pattern piece, the grading disappears. Don't fear, it's still there. If you hit the edit grading, you can see it. Or if you go over to the t-shirt, the garment display option menu in your 2D window, you can say show grading, and that will maintain the grading, kind of whatever you're doing with your piece. So now I'm going to rotate this back to the normal orientation, counterclockwise 90. If I want to look at the grading again for this piece, I can look in here, look at the edit grading, I can select points, and I can see what the values are and make sure they're the same. They have switched the axes, right? Because the grading has been rotated, but they've done it in a way that makes sense. It's still correct. And I can even then see the distance between all of my pieces if I care to, by opening up that distance value. I typically don't use this distance value unless I have an actual spreadsheet with these new numbers in there because the math can get a bit tricky. But you can create that spreadsheet by using these values as well if you prefer. Okay. I also want to point out that when you do these changes on a linked piece, the other side of my piece is also graded in the exact same but opposite way. And I can merge those back together if I want to. So I can select each line, right click and merge. And it will still maintain my grading very nicely. Okay.